Welcome, finalists, to the inaugural episode of The Vault. I'm Waltz, and I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Rio, and today's episode is sponsored by Booze. Pop,
Pop,
pour,
Pour,
and
Perform.
perform. Honestly, I love my Booze every morning. It's what gets me going, and I can't wait to have another one later this afternoon.
If you haven't tried it yet, you should try it in your cereal, actually. I've heard it's delicious. I've been told it's the best way to have it.
There we go. We'll have to give it a try. So, why don't you talk a little bit about who we are? I think that you're probably the little bit more well-known figure in the community, so why don't you make an introduction of yourself, Waltz?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know me, I'm Waltz, of course. I am one of the tournament hosts that is currently in the scene. I do a lot of casting, observing. I've been hosting tournaments since the beginning of Season 3, a lot of community tournaments, some with some of the more competitive side of the game, but really just trying to highlight the amazing game and the way that it can actually be competitive. I really think there can be a future there. I've done casting of all my tournaments. I've also done observing for some of the events such as Breakout. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, looking forward to the rest of the scene and continuing to host my own events. And speaking of Breakout, of course, Rio, tell us a little bit about your journey with the finals.
Yeah, so the Breakout is a great introduction because I was one of the head casters for the Breakout tournaments. Overall, Breakout did 14 events, and I was the caster for 12 of those events. So I really got a in-depth overview and really understanding of what this scene is. I got to see a lot of the players as they started off as brand new people in the scene to turn into really some of the top names that we have in the scene as well. So I am in a point where I want to continue casting games, I want to continue being involved in the community, and really just anything that is the finals, that's what I'm all about right now.
And that's really why we did want to make this podcast a sort of talk show. Just in general, we really both enjoy the game. We want to see where this goes competitively and casually, of course, but especially on the competitive side, it's something we're both very into. And so we wanted this to be, in many ways, sort of a one-stop shop for you. If you're interested in the finals as a competitive game, or even just the events surrounding it, watching, competing. We wanted this to be where you can go to get your news for what's happening in the scene, and also what to look out for, because sometimes it can be kind of hard to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, because even myself being so ingrained in the community, in the scene, there's still just a lot that I miss out on. For instance, I wasn't aware of your tournaments until we met during Breakout, and now that we do, I'm glad that you are still doing them, because I think it's an important part of the scene. But that does lead us, we keep saying the word scene, and I think that brings us to our next topic, because one of the things we want to do with this talk show is bring up a topic every episode. And this first topic is there even a competitive scene? What is the scene right now? And, Waltz, do you want to kind of give us an overview of what you do? I guess answering the first question, is there a competitive scene in the finals?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, right now, not really.
Okay.
And I say that not because there aren't people competing at it, and there are events happening, but the events have really they've either been one-offs for the most part, or they have often been a proof of concept. For instance, Breakout did their essentially a year-long event, starting kind of in I believe Season 2. Is that correct? And
Yep.
Culminating in their Worlds event, which was a fantastic event, but it was really in many ways kind of a proof of concept. It was to say, here's how we could do the finals. There have been other various events. Obviously, my tournaments have been going on. Those are generally one-day events, a lot smaller, just to give people a taste of it without having to commit for a long time. So those aren't meant to be long, sustained events. There's been various other smaller events. There was an Indian, essentially like talent showdown recently that was done in Season 4. There's been various Nexon offline events in Japan.
Yeah.
One of the more involved alongside Breakout. I cannot remember if it was India, but there was a Terminal Attack tournament that
Really?
happened over a few weeks as well back in Season 3. So
Nice.
there is a scene, but the scene is very scattered. It is very intermittent. And so when we talk about is there a competitive scene, it really does not exist as we would think about esports scenes yet. It is it's very nascent. It is in its infancy, and it is so close to being there, but it's not there yet, at least the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I basically agree with everything that you said there. In my opinion, is there a scene? Does a scene exist? I do want to say yes, but I want to say that we are at basically level one of 100 levels, and I that's not to undermine anything that's happened or really showcase something that has happened recently. It's more just that we are getting started in this. This is the very beginning, and that was what was really cool about the whole breakout event series, is that I got to see a lot of these teams start to form. I got to see a lot of these rivalries almost get started. You get to see players develop into themselves and really kind of their role in kind of their teams. And I think that that to me really starts to scream, this is the foundation of a scene. And I think it's why Waltz and I are so excited to get into this, is because we truly believe that this is going somewhere. We wouldn't be doing this if we felt like this is a community that'll fizzle out in 6 months. I truly believe that right now we are getting started on something pretty major, if you will.
No, I agree absolutely, and that's again getting back to why we're doing this. Is one of the things we want to do is we want to be able to highlight those events that are happening. As you mentioned, Rio, you didn't even know that my events were happening. A lot of people don't know about honestly any of the stuff that's going on in the scene because things are so splintered. And we want to be able to put a highlight on both the events, but also the people involved in that. We want to look at things like the Pro Hubs events with people like Mickey and Dusselis and Rampage and the someone and the work that they're putting into fostering probably the best sort of hub that we have for competitive finals right now, and the effort they've put into fostering that.
Why don't you just give a quick overview of what the Pro Hubs is? Because you're right, it is kind of the place to be. And so for people that are maybe curious about getting into the professional side of things, or getting into the gaming, just more competitive focus. So just kind of give an overview of what the Pro Hub is and what they're trying to do, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So the Pro Hub server has been kind of a work in progress for pretty much the entire the entire time the game has been around. There's been a lot of different servers that have been devoted to high level scrims, to giving people the chance to play competitively, and it's no secret as the game lost players initially, and there were growing pains with it. A lot of people left, and some of those servers started to fall apart. And there's been a really concerted effort by the owners of the Pro Hubs Discord to make it the centralized place to play competitive finals. They frequently, daily, they host pickup games where you can play against other high-level players. They offer a centralized place to organize scrims. And they do also frequently, especially they've started in season 4, as well as moving now into season 5. They're hosting events, tournaments with prize pools. I know they're looking to do more as well. So it has been a sort of a long time. There's a lot of effort and a lot of love that's been poured into that server. Absolutely. And so they've really begun this process of giving people a chance to move up there. There are certain requirements that you have to be able to join, but if you are at that level where you're thinking about playing it competitively, you can join and you can start playing against other people. And as you learn, other people can vouch for you, and you'll get the chance to play with even better players. It's essentially a way for you to kind of earn your way through the scene, is what they want it to eventually be.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful, because you do have people that are playing at a high level, and just giving them the opportunity to scrim with other people that are at even higher levels. It's really kind of how you make a community. And so big shout out to the Pro Hub, because we're both Waltz and I are really impressed with what you're doing. And for anybody that hasn't heard of them, now this is kind of where everything is kind of centered around, and most likely going to be the kind of focus going forward for the pro scene.
Yeah. And so that's where we talked about sort of that's why we want to run this, is we want to be able to put that spotlight on groups like that. We want to be able to point to these events that are happening that you may not be aware of, but that does obviously very much make us ask the question, where are we going? If you're watching this, you probably pay attention to competitive finals anyways. You probably watched some of these events, and you obviously know that there was a $100,000 event that was announced by Embark. They committed to doing a major event sometime in 2025. No details on that yet, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But there is, at the moment, excitement about the future of competitive finals, and definitely some interest and some questions, though, that need to be asked. And so right now, obviously, our big thing is, what happens moving forward, and where do we see things going? What is this next year going to look like, and what can we, why are we trying to put a highlight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just having a major means that there's going to be, teams developed, and that there's going to be people that are wanting to get into it. We might see new teams that are forming that were not involved in any of the past events, tournaments, or anything like that. And I think that that's what's exciting. As more information about this major comes out, I think that the hype will build around it. But overall, it's just really cool and exciting to see that Embark is wanting to invest in their community so that they believe that there could be a scene here as well. And in my opinion, I see a lot of reflections of the early CS:GO scene. Actually, I was a big fan and big follower of the CS:GO scene back in the day. Right when it launched, there was nobody watching the tournaments. There was hardly anybody really getting into it. A lot of the professional talent were people that were either pulled from other games or just kind of getting together for the first time, or had been a Counter-Strike player in the past. And that scene really developed into what it is now. And as somebody that's kind of doing this again, I definitely see the parallels there. And I think that we're just at a really exciting point that having a major really could bring this game kind of into the limelight that it really needs.
Absolutely. And so when we look forward to this next year, one of the things we're going to try to do is we're going to bring on and have for interviews and also just some chats with people that are involved with the scene, people within the pro hubs community, people within the wider tournament scene, and as also hopefully some of the pro players, and get a feel for how they're viewing the game, what they think about it. We want to actually get to know some of the people that are involved in there, because getting to have those storylines, like you said, and building that community around the competitive scene is, of course, going to be a really big part of it. And I think that begs the question, and this is the part where I want us to take a really hard look, and I think this is going to be the biggest part of this inaugural episode as we sort of talk about what's coming, is I think we need to look very closely at what needs to happen in the next year. Because as much as I love the game, and as much effort as I've been putting into things, the time and the money and the investment, is a game I absolutely love, and I look forward to a competitive future with this game. It is not there yet, and there are a lot of things that need to happen. And so I think we need to have a very honest discussion about what sort of things does Embark need to do, what do we need to see this next year, and what can we actually expect from this big event? What is it supposed to be, and what is it not supposed to be, and where do we set our expectations?
Yeah, so I think that for starters, I want to agree with you that I don't think it's ready for the prime time. I think that given a year, I think that we will be in a place that it will be better and better showcase of what the finals is. But I think that one of really the biggest issues that I see going forward is just kind of the user experience, the viewer experience, actually, from kind of these events. And we have come a long way. If you go back and you watch some of the earliest breakout events before we had the spectator camera, we were actually having people stream their own desktops. We would then capture that footage and then replay it with everybody talking over themselves and in a giant Discord call, and it was chaotic. Thankfully, fast forward probably about 3 months, maybe, we actually started to get viewer controls. So we had not viewer controls, what's it called? Camera controls in the game. And that's actually something that Waltz ended up doing for the tournaments, was actually the camera controls. But in that in itself, there are a lot of limitations, and I'll let Waltz talk more about that in a second. Just kind of the limitations of from the camera point of view. But overall, I think that there was a really great video made by one of my co-casters, Jerry, on the topic of kind of what the issues are in this viewing experience. And one of the major things he brings up is that it's a little too chaotic, and the fact that we are missing a lot of things like a kill cam, kill feed, and just a lot of little kind of quality of life things that we would have in other games, like the ability to switch between people, or the ability to kind of create quick clips, or like roll back and kind of see what's happened. And there's a lot there. So overall, I think that where we are now and where we will be in a year will be very different, but I think that they need to really focus on that viewer experience, because if people tune in and watch the finals and watch a tournament for the first time, they need to be excited. They need to understand what's happening without too much instruction, and I think that that's to me is the biggest challenge. I don't know, Waltz, if you want to kind of give your overview of what you think needs to be ready, for this to be an actual major.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The spectator is a big part of that. The viewing perspective is very much a flawed thing right now. And that is multiple different things. It comes from the controls that we have to the way that information is presented in the game to just the options for controls we have, like in the minute details. For instance, when you are in a third camera mode, you can see the outlines of every player, but when you go into first person perspective, you can no longer see the outlines of players. And so you cannot see how teams are moving around a lot of the time, which causes, obviously, that it hurts. The caster can't build the tension. Like think about the big moments from CS:GO is how close they are to somebody, and that builds the tension. And that's really the big thing for me, is that, like, as a viewer, and the whole point of being a caster and the whole point of being an observer is to build this storyline within the game. And what we need are the tools to do that. If you really do want like a long form look at that, obviously Jerry's video is fantastic. Apo has an interview with Stars that's quite good, and Thixie also has a video on some of the things that need to be added to really make it a fantastic thing. But the long and short of it is we need the tools to build a storyline. And that involves actually being able to control where we're looking at, what information we have on screen, and exactly when that appears, because that is going to be what we need. So, and at this point, the biggest problem I think with that side of things has been that just the polish isn't there. Like, the focus has not been on custom matches overall in the competitive scene, because they've been trying to get the game to a point where people actually want to play it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've been around for the history of the game since it released, you know that there was a non-stop posting of Steam charts. People would not shut up about the falling player numbers for seasons, and it was like there's been ups and there's been some big downs. And with Season 4, it was a huge return to form for them, and they started gaining players for the first time again. And then Season 5 seems to have landed really popular. And so they finally got the game to a point where they are happy with, I think, the baseline of what people can expect. And so now's the time to focus on those ancillary parts of the game. And so I think we're going to see more polish. They've already committed to overhauling custom matches in Season 6. So I think that side of things, I think we are going to see that improve a lot. And, like, there's a lot of we could talk all day about the sort of things they need to add. Like I said, there's plenty of other avenues to do that. And this we're not going to dive into that in this podcast, but the point is I think that's coming, but that is one of the biggest things that holds it back, because without the ability to actually control what's being seen, the viewer isn't going to get a solid story, and that holds things back.
Yeah, it is all about the storyline, and you're right. Building the tension was difficult from a caster's perspective, just because things would be so chaotic, and sometimes, like when somebody would die, it had that weird kill cam, and you would be almost locked into them for about 2 seconds. And in a game like the finals, 2 seconds can really mean a lot. Like, a lot can change in just a few seconds. So it is hard to build that tension. But from a positive point of view, there is a groundwork there already. And I really do employ a lot of people, if you haven't watched them, go back and watch some of the last events that Breakout did, because by that point we had kind of an established way of doing it, and it started to really get decent, in my opinion. And I think that going forward, it's only going to get more refined, because you got to remember that this is still a new game. It's only been out for a year, and I know that esports and everything kind of lives and dies in flashes, but a year is a good staying point for a game anyway. So we're going forward, and I don't think that this will be a game that is a flash in the pan. And I think that there's really kind of a lot that is going to change from us speaking now and in a year. But I think that we've kind of exhausted everything that we can talk about issues. Let's talk about the other thing that's happening right now, which is Season 5. Season 5 kind of got kicked off 2 weeks ago. Is that right?
About 2 weeks ago, yeah, almost exactly 2 weeks ago, we finally got to look at Season 5 and everything they had ready for us.
So what are your overall thoughts just right now on Season 5? I've played it quite a bit. I've even played with you quite a bit. What are your just initial reaction to launching into Season 5? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with Season 5, they proved that they've found a good balance of the game on the casual side of things. You look at the weapons. I don't see any complaints about overpowered weapons. The Shack 50 is in a fantastic position. That new heavy weapon. It's strong. But I don't see people complaining about it. The only thing I see is people complaining that medium shotgun is actually too weak. Which is a little refreshing considering how often we've been complaining about too powerful shotguns. And obviously, you know, I know there's always talk about, you know, things like the model and stuff like that. And I in the fervor of the new season, we haven't seen as many people talking about that. I think maybe with the removal of visual recoil, which is another huge thing for a competitive scene, the visual recoil was, I've talked to many people who said that's one of the things holding it back from being a competitive game. With that being removed, some of the ARs and other weapons, long-range weapons, are buffed just by the nature of not having to control that recoil. So I think they've finally hit on the secret sauce with this game in Season 5. And so, like, I don't see a lot of issues with it on that side of things. And one of the big things that I liked as well is that when they updated Quick Cache, the rules were changed to have a wave respawn, like Power Shift. And for a lot of people reading through the patch notes, they probably saw that and just, okay, sure, I'm moving on. When I read that, that was the standout line in the patch for me. Because up to this point, the only way to simulate a 3 versus 3, a 2-team final round of a tournament, was via Quick Cache. We didn't have the option to actually simulate the final round of a tournament otherwise. And so that one change could have basically killed the competitive scene just a week, just days after they announced their $100,000 tournament. And they heard the competitive scene, they heard the players, and they said, okay, we'll make the effort. And it was a very last minute effort, and that is something I do want to talk about later, but they did listen. And you know, regardless of maybe the mistakes they made, they've shown with this game that they're willing to listen, and that's reflected in this season.
I completely agree. I think that when I look at this season, I think that it is probably the most balanced that we've seen. And people might disagree with us, but one of the things that I've noticed is that I've actually had more games with light, medium, heavy composition actually work. I've been playing a lot of World Tour, and that composition has gotten me not just to the final round, but won more than any other season I've ever played. And to me, that really showcases that we've gone from a switch from me seeing like when a light player would be there as like, oh no, this is going to hold back the team, to like, oh wow, this is a really good comp, because we now have somebody that can be really movement based and orient themselves kind of in a different position, kind of catch people off guard. We've got the medium who's there to really kind of anchor and be the heart of the team, and then you've got heavy who can really do a lot of damage and take a lot of damage. But if you have all three of those working together, it's like a functioning heart, and it's amazing what it can do. And I just think that, and you're right too, I have seen the amount of complaining go down on the finals more than any other season. Normally at this point we'd have thread after thread about oh my god, this needs to buff, I'm leaving the game because of this, blah blah blah. And I think that you're right, they hit that special secret sauce, and I think they hit it at the perfect time too. I felt this way going into Season 4 as well, mainly because they buffed my favorite weapon, the CL40, and then they stole that from me. But I really think that this season is balanced, and I'm having a blast, and I hope that you out there are as well. If you don't agree with me, let us know, because I'm really curious to hear other people's opinion on the meta, or what you think the state of the game is, because you know, we might be skewed. I know that I am, because I'm kind of involved in the scene and I really want it to be something. So you know, let us know, we might be wrong, but I'm really impressed with where it is. And I think that from the viewpoint of somebody that had never played it before, if they hop into the game, I think that they'll have more fun than they've ever had in any other season, and that's a great place to be. For Season 5.
Yeah, the game, like I think casually, I think the game is better than it's ever been, and you see that borne out in sort of the reviews and how people are sticking with the game. But the question, of course, is that going to bear out onto the competitive side? We did see, going back to the Pro Hubs guys again, and the events they've been putting on, right at the end of Season 4, they put on an event, and we actually had a light, medium, heavy team beat out a medium heavy team. It was a fantastic final round. You should definitely check out their Discord channel, watch that video. It's a fantastic series. But we actually saw a light, medium, heavy team win. And I have heard a lot from various people in the scene that they think light, medium, heavy might be back on the menu for Season 5. there were a lot of buffs to various things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the XP got a little bit of a reversion of some of its nerf. The 93R is in a strong place. They didn't mess with they in fact they buffed the LH1 significantly between visual recoil and a red dot with some invis buffs. Like we might genuinely see a light, medium, heavy, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And I think I want to talk about that side of things a little bit too, about sort of like how you manage a competitive scene in a game that is still like, as much as I think they have kind of found a sweet spot, it's only been out for a year and there is still room to go. And so when we look at the competitive scene, one of the things that has been happening very consistently is that within Breakout, within my tournaments, things like that, even pro hubs have had this, there are always rules and restrictions on what you can and cannot do in the game. And that's, I mean, like every tournament has rules on what you cannot do, but most of the major esports are kind of built around the esport, and so there's not a lot of, oh, you can't purchase this or you can't do this, you can't go here. In the finals, we have consistently seen clauses where maybe you can't run more than one heavy. Or if you do, you can't run the same specialization twice. You can't run 2 winches. You can't run 2 meshes. If you're going to run during the heyday of season 4, we saw people say you can't run 2 models because 2 models is oppressive. In some of my tournaments, I've done a roll lock of light, medium, heavy because otherwise you just see the exact same thing over and over again. Like there are lots of restrictions. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this because as we look forward to this next year, I want to see, as we get closer to kind of the big event that we're looking forward to, and again, we'll talk about that later, but I want to see more experimentation with that sort of thing. I don't think it's bad to have restrictions on the game, especially right now. I don't think that's an inherently bad thing. I think especially with a game as chaotic as this, having the community decide on what sort of restrictions there are, especially now, doesn't inherently mean it's bad for competitive scene. But I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of thoughts on this, mainly because there's 2 ways of doing it. And I think you're right. The game is in a state for casual players, and one of my fears is that as we go more into a professional scene, is that they might try and adapt more towards what the professional scene does, and in doing that, they risk alienating the casual scene because things that seem more OP are way overused and abused. And I think that's where you're right, as in having these rule set, having these restrictions actually help that balance come in play, because I think that it allows the game to still appeal to casual people, and then you have a rule set for people that are really serious about a scene. You're not breaking the game in having that rule set, and you're not breaking the game by making it less accessible for casual players. So I think that as they go forward, they really need to toe that line between what is competitive, what is casual. And I think that we honestly need a rule set from kind of Embark that they think would be the most competitive. I do believe that when Breakout was developing their rule set, they did work with Embark a little bit to kind of get their feeling on it. And I was pretty okay with their rule set. But you're I think we have a great example now. Waltz, you're about to host a tournament this weekend, and what made you decide on your rule set? Because I guess first off, give the people an overview of what your rules are and why you're doing it that way.
Yeah, so I by the time this comes out, it's probably already happened. I am running a Christmas tournament, so it's supposed to be it's not supposed to be taken seriously, and so I wanted to experiment with the format because the finals format is basically right now it is either 2 things. It is either rounds of cash out to seed teams, and then you play final round 2 team one-on-one matches to decide eliminations, or you just play 3v3 and you just have essentially the final round 1 team on 1 team, duke it out, and then progress. Cash out is only battle royales are as chaotic when it comes to the game mode. I mean, no other esport is going to have 4 teams on a map at the same time. It's not how it's not how it works, and it causes issues with things. And at least like no FPS esport, right? And so, like, I think that causes a lot of people to shy away from cash out and say, "Oh, it'll never be involved in an event," and so they leave it to at best seeding matches. And in that I agree. I think that the randomness of cash out means that if you're going to play maybe 2 games and you get eliminated because you're bottom 2, I think that works for a ranked experience. I think that works for a casual world tour. You get knocked out, you just queue again. For a tournament, that is not a good system. You cannot do that. You cannot play 2 rounds of a game that is inherently like there is randomness to it. You can manage the randomness. We see the top teams control the chaos.
Yeah.
But it's still chaos. And not every team can win every single time. And upsets will happen. And while upsets are always fun to watch, it needs to be the team that's doing the upsetting actually earning it instead of just sort of getting lucky. And so I agree. I don't think you want to have best of 3 cash out matches. However, I think there's a lot of experimentation. So for my event, it's 8 teams. We are doing 5 games where you get points based on your placement, and then the top 4 move on. But instead of doing 3v3, I decided I'm going to put all 4 teams back in a cash out match. And if you've ever watched Trackmania esports, you will be familiar with this system, because essentially I'm going to do the same thing with the top 4 teams. They're going to play matches and they're going to earn points based on their placement. So it sounds like your first stage, but instead of playing a limited number of games, we're going to play and we're going to keep playing matches until they earn a certain number of points. So once a team gets to a certain number of points, they become a finalist. And then that team has to get first place in a match to actually win. So it's weird. It's different. We're not doing any 3v3s. We're sticking 4 teams all the way. It's different. I know there are going to be problems with it, but I wanted to try something really unique. I wanted to do something that actually played with the game mode, and I wanted to bridge that gap of having a team that if you are the top team in the lobby, you'll earn enough points to get to that final point, and you will find a way to get first place. Maybe not your first match. When you reach that finalist status, maybe it's not your first match, maybe it's not your second, but you have the chance to get there, and if you're good enough, you will get that first place position, especially in a game as random as cash out, as chaotic. Even if a team's trying to focus you, things go wrong. So and that's something that I want to see, and I think I actually want to go back and later and push back on, I think talking about Embark providing rules, because actually I think I disagree on that point, because I think I think it's incumbent on sort of the scene to experiment with things and not so quickly decide on the best format. We are only a year into the game's life. We are only a year into the game so far. There is still so much that we have left to learn about the game. There's still, experimentations with formats. And if we decide what the best is right now, I think we are kind of cutting ourselves a little short, and we're limiting ourselves in what we can try, because it's a unique game with a unique future. I think you're right. Kind of pushes us in a corner if we do make a decision and say, no, this is the rule set and that's final. And I think that we are lucky to have community events that, you're right, this is the time to experiment. And I think that that's kind of, to sum everything up about what we've been talking about, this is a community. We are here. If you're listening and if you've made it this far, you're here because you like the finals and you want to be a part of that community, or at least you want to know what's happening in that community. And I think that doing little community tournaments, doing the Pro Hub stuff, is really kind of where we're headed. And I think that you're right. I think it's ripe for experimentation, and kind of the future is going to be almost determined by what we do now and in this next year. So I don't know. I'm very excited about this next year. I'm very excited about kind of what the scene is going to kind of evolve into. And I don't know. I'm very excited just overall, and I can't wait to see what happens. That's kind of my overall thoughts about everything that we just talked about so far. Oh yeah, no, I agree. As much like, I think there's a really, really bright future for it. I think there's a lot we can do. And I think for me, like, the biggest thing I want to say, like, as we kind of take our next step and we look towards sort of this big event that Embark has announced. because there's smaller events. I'm going to continue doing things. I'm going to try and push even more. I'm going to try to do even more events this year.
Nice.
I know that people like the Pro Hubs guys have announcement that they're going to put out soon. I know they have lots of tournaments that they're going to keep doing. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening, and there's a lot of things that we have to do. And I want to maybe temper our expectations a little bit when it comes to the big event with Embark and sort of the $100,000 land and what it actually means, because we've talked about this burgeoning competitive scene. And I want to go back to the comment you made about having Embark provide the rule set.
Yeah.
Something that I have been very vocal about, and I've talked with various people about, and I get a lot of pushback from this. I don't think Embark should run any competitive scene. I do not think they should run it. And my reasoning for that, and I people hear that and they say, well, why wouldn't they? They want to make sure this is good. There's a big difference between them supporting a competitive scene and running a competitive scene.
Okay.
Even some of the biggest esports did not begin running their own competitive scene until it was already established. I mean, you want to point to Valorant? Sure, point to Valorant. But Riot clearly had an established... They knew how to do that. They have an entire division dedicated to esports. They knew what they wanted from the beginning. Look at something like Overwatch, one of the biggest, competitive scenes that ever was. And I mean, did it crash and burn? Sure. But my point is that it started with third-party groups. It didn't start with Blizzard forcing their own league. They did eventually, but it started with third-party groups. If we expect Embark to step in and run a tournament scene, they don't have the people for that. They do not have esports people. There is so much manpower that goes into managing these things, planning these things, and you have to have somebody who is used to that, who knows what to bring forward. One of the things that I need to see this in the next month, maybe 2 months, absolutely max. We need to know more details about what this event looks like. Roughly when is it going to take place? Are there going to be qualifiers for it? What is the format of the event? The thing is, this is going to be a big event. But I think if people are expecting this 100,000 tournament to essentially be the big, introduction of competitive finals and like a big league essentially being established, I think they're looking in the wrong place. I think this is very much a stamp that they're putting their foot down, and Embark is saying, we are here to support the community scene and we want to do this. But I don't think it means that they are then going to provide an entire scene, nor do I think they should, because if they do, it is not going to be done as well as it is if they work with a third-party group, because Embark will stretch themselves so thin. And I think they just get caught in a position where it's not going to live up to the expectations that people have. And so you need a third-party group that is very storied, that knows what they're doing with this stuff, and is willing to ask those questions that Embark might not be willing to ask themselves, like, why do you do this? Or can we have this? Because there's always questions that people have when you bring in outside groups that are like, hey, why doesn't this exist? Like, and I want to go back to Embark not realizing that changing the quick cash rules was going to ruin the competitive scene. That is close. Yeah, that is a massive oversight. They almost did that. They listened and they changed. But the fact that they almost did that means that they are not keyed in to their scene enough to fully understand what it needs. And if you're expecting them to understand what the scene needs enough to run and host a league, then I think you are expecting too much.
Yeah, I kind of sadly agree. With the caveat that I think that it still is a good starting point. Yeah, they might not be capable of handling it all the way, but I think that I still really am behind it because I think it's the push that we need. I think that it's the little bit of validity that we need for this scene at the moment. I think it's just kind of really ties together everything that we're doing, and with the also same time that if this goes horribly, the whole scene is probably going to implode. So it's like walking a tightrope. But I don't know. it is not going to be the be all end all, but I think that it might be the kind of flashpoint or the starting point that
Oh,
it
absolutely.
needs. So,
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. I mean, I'm in no way trying to sit here and be a Debbie Downer and say Embark is ruining the game. They don't know what they're doing in the competitive scene. They have no clue. Like, I don't think they were not focusing on that. The game has been out for a year, and only within the last month did they actually start to look at the competitive scene and say, "Oh, what are you guys doing? What's happening
yeah.
over there? We didn't see you in that corner that you were in." And they've now taken notice of us, and they took enough notice that they established this event. And like I said, like, the event is amazing. I am
Yeah.
incredibly excited for this event, and I agree with you. This is going to be the flashpoint
Yep.
for competitive finals. This next year is a build up to it. We are going to
Yep.
see community events step up. We're going to see hopefully some qualifiers. That hopefully they bring in people like
Yeah.
Breakout, like Pro Hubs, to have feeder teams, bring teams in, get people known. Have Breakout run things like qualifiers. Get teams need to have a story moving into this, and then this is going to be the event to say and show to the world, here is what a competitive final scene could look like. And if that goes well, that could encourage a third party group. Other organizers could look at this and say, hey, we could do that too. Maybe there's a future here, right? Like Breakout did that just because they wanted to show that, but there needs to be more incentive for a lot of these larger groups to do so. And so that is what this $100,000 major is for. It is not to herald the beginning of a finals esports, right? It is here to give people the incentive to start that.
Yep. Take it and run. And yeah, I think that overall, we have a lot coming, and I'm happy that we have a lot of people that are getting involved. We have a lot of people that are excited, and really, from the people that aren't involved, there's so much happening behind the scenes. There's so many content creators. There's so many people that are wanting to hop into this, and I think overall this is the turning point, and this is a very bright future for the finals as a game and finals as a scene. So yeah, I think Waltz. I'm not sure if there's anything else really to kind of bring up today. I think that we've covered quite a lot over the scene, what it is, where we think it'll go, season 5, the $100,000 major, your tournaments, pro hubs. I think that we have really covered quite a lot today. Is there anything else you kind of want to bring up or talk about before we kind of wrap this episode up? Or
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, I think it was a mistake to give me a platform. Clearly, I'm going to talk way too much, and clearly, I'm going to get way too passionate about it. But yeah, no, I agree. I think at this point, I mean, we could continue to talk for hours, but
yep,
at a certain point, we have to call it. And I do think we've kind of covered sort of where things have to go, what is happening. Like we said, in terms of upcoming events, by the time this comes out, my event on the 21st is almost certainly going to have happened. But depending on when you get out, there's also going to be a Pro Hubs event on the 29th that you should definitely tune into and check out. And keep an eye out. Maybe check out my Discord with the Waltzcast Discord. Going to be posting a lot of news about new events. 2025 looking incredibly, incredibly exciting. There's going to be a lot of events happening. So we're going to have a lot more to talk about. We're hoping to try and do this once we get into the new year. I think every maybe 2 weeks or so, we'll see where things fit. But I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening that we're going to have to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're going to strive for as well on every episode of this that we publish, I want to try and have a list in the comments of upcoming events. So if you are interested, check the comment section, not the comment, the description, and we will kind of have big events that are coming up so you can either watch or get involved in. But overall, I think that this is just going to be an exciting year. I think that if you have listened to us talk, I think that you're probably the perfect person to be involved in the scene as well. So try and get involved, follow what's going on, and I don't really have much else to say other than thank you guys for listening, and I can't wait to see where the competitive and the finals go.
Neither can I. I couldn't finish it any better myself. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I'm sorry you had to listen to us for so long, but we appreciate it. Definitely let us know what you think. If there's anything that we can do to improve, we want this to be a really fun show to watch. We want to try to have fun with it while we have serious conversations. So let us know, and don't forget to buy your Ospoos.
Drinking Ospoos every day. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you next time.